So I wanted to talk about a few things today, but before we jump into it, just want to look at sort of our schedule and where we're headed. Thank you. Anybody else needing the attendance sheet? All right. So we are here, right? And you'll notice that today is listed as rigging 2. We kind of postponed one day so you could have a work day. So the last class period was substance. And I think most of the stuff I want to talk about in rigging, I'm able to get in one day. So I think we're all right. Let's face it, I'm not going to teach an entire rigging class. Like there's a reason we have the TD class, and that's to cover rigging. Has anyone not taken TD? Okay, in my previous class, there was people too. I thought it was a prerequisite for this, but maybe not. So that's okay. Like you're not. I don't think you're going to be that far behind on anything, and that's part of what today is for, is to kind of cover that in the same way that substance definitely is going to get covered way better in lighting and rendering. But I wanted to introduce you to a little bit of all of it. So. So talking about our schedule, Wednesday when we come back, so this weekend is fall break, right? You all know how fall break works. It's a long weekend. You have Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday and Tuesday we have off as well. And we come back on Wednesday, and I know how it'll be. Everybody will come dragging in, just have sand in their hair from the beach, and it's hard to get started back after fall break for some reason. So I've kind of tried to combat that by just having something due as soon as we come back from fall break. However, I'd say most of you probably have already sort of checked that off the list. So let's talk about the exercise that is due as soon as we get back from fall break, which is milestone 3. Right? So if we scroll down here to milestone 3, you all are pretty familiar with this. Approximately 90% of the modeling complete. We're going to review the schedule and asset list again. And the materials and texture should be about 50% complete. I'm going to eyeball those percentages. I'm not counting things or doing complex math or anything. I say 90% of the modeling because a good portion of you are going to discover models you didn't know you needed halfway through this project, and have to put those in there, and I understand that. That's just part of the production pipeline. 50% of the materials, meaning you should probably go ahead and get started on that. Recognize that you can't really tell what a material looks like until you start rendering. So plop some lights in some of your scenes before you start making materials and see what that's looking like. And if you have any questions on this, feel free to run it by me. Again, I recognize that everybody's project is a little different, and so I'm kind of flexible on these exercises. The biggest point for these exercises, for these milestones, is to make sure you're going to be able to hit the actual presentations, right? If I were just at the beginning of class, make an animation, good luck, I'll see you in 14 weeks, right? It's so easy to just put stuff off. So these are kind of our checklists, or our check-ins to make sure we're staying on track. If I had to write this again, I would put a first pass of your layout in there as well. Even though that's not on the milestone, I strongly encourage you to get something like that done as soon as you can. It's going to tell you so much about what you need to be able to do, or need to do. Okay, any questions about the milestone? Okay, so when we come back, we're going to be pretty much ready to jump into animation, or at least I'm going to start covering animation. I have sort of blocked off 3 days for animation, where I'm going to cover very specific reminders for animation. Some of that, it's kind of going to be a little bit of a crash course in all of the animation classes, right? Reminders about overlapping action. There's a couple of lessons I have where I'm going to sort of go over sort of tips and tricks for creative problem solving in animation. We're going to talk a little bit about some animation tools that may help you achieve better animation. So we got 2 or 3 days where I'm just going to be talking about animation. That's where I get to nerd out on my on the stuff I like talking about. And hopefully that will give you some extra like pointers on how to make things move, right? Some of it's going to be that you haven't actually set a lot of keyframes in a while, and it's just you need that reminder, or you need like a reiteration of something to kind of get you back in that mindset. Okay. How are y'all feeling about this schedule? Are you feeling like you're on track? How many of you feel like you're a little behind schedule right now? Okay. I almost always feel a little behind schedule. If I ever feel like I'm ahead of schedule, I get worried that I've forgotten something. Okay, cool. So the other thing I wanted to chat about was how many of you got a chance to go to the portfolio reviews last night? Cool. Several people. What'd you think? It was all right. Was that anybody's first time at portfolio review? Okay. So again, they're tomorrow night. It's an extra credit opportunity. If you want to go, I strongly encourage it. Like, I would almost tell someone to stay here an extra semester if they had not watched portfolio yet before taking portfolio. Like, it's such a different experience than anything else you go through while you're here at ETSU, and as I'm sure Andrew can attest to right now, it's stressful, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
a little stressful. You are going to, but it's still my favorite part of the semester. Like every year, I love watching portfolios. I love seeing what y'all come up with, and every time I'm like worried, every time like I've met with people and I'm like, I don't know if they're going to pull something together, I'm always surprised. Like what you were able to pull off in those last 2 hours before you present is always amazing to me. I'm like, how did you do that? Like you reanimated that whole shot in 2 hours? Wow.
That reminds me when you give me a tour of the facility like 2 days before portfolio.
Oh yeah.
What did you do?
I remember giving your tour when you came through here, actually. I think I've given several tours to students who finally came here. And it's interesting to, anyway, I enjoy it, but I definitely think that there is a benefit to doing it, to watching the portfolio reviews. So I'll get off my soapbox on that. Today what we're going to talk about is rigging. How many of you do not like rigging? All right, Megan's hands. It's like a race or something. Bless you. That's okay, because my advice for you in this project in terms of rigging is don't. So let's think about how technical direction, the class, works. In that class, just like character animation, right? You're learning that like rigging and technical direction is a job, right? And so how you learn that is to go through all of the basics of like, you want to create a rig? First, let's learn how joints work, right? And you create a joint and you start building that. And that is a very viable career, right? We actually have a lot of people who have graduated from here and gone on to some great jobs in technical direction and rigging. One of them is Chase Cooper. Did anybody see his Skype talk last year? I think it was one of the people we talked to. He was here when I was an undergrad, and no, I'm sorry, he was here when I was a grad student. He was an undergrad, and like it is a good career because most people in animation are not huge fans of rigging, right? And when you find somebody who loves it, you're like, awesome, you can do all of it, right? Like, we'll let you have all of that rigging, huh?
And then the rigger's like, awesome.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing I think we miss is that, like, when you go in and sit down at a job as a rigging artist, it's not like, gotta rig this character today, and you open up the model and you're like, first I'll go to skeleton, create joint, and you start like manually drawing your skeleton. Like, these people like haven't manually created a joint in years, right? Like they start automating things in the same way that you do, right? In the same way that, like, when the first time you animated, you went through there and manually clicked every control on your character to select the whole thing, and you're like, oops, I missed one, and like now you know, oh, I make a button for it, I select everything. Like it's like there's shortcuts that everybody takes. And so for rigging a full character, they probably have a set of scripts that they click that automates the creation of an entire skeleton, right? And they have a whole skeleton ready in like 2 minutes, right? And then they have these locators they move around to reposition that skeleton, and then they have a set of scripts they run to clean up that skeleton to make sure all the joint orientations are correct.
Now
And all of
skeleton board.
huh?
Now that we skeleton board.
Yeah. So like all of that stuff is very automated because time is money, right? And like that's not the harder problems to solve. Like, you're not getting paid to be a rigging artist because you know where the skeleton create joint menu is, right? You're doing it to solve problems. And so they automate a lot of stuff, and even at that pace, it still could take a week to rig a character, right? So your purpose for rigging this is not to create a rig that is going to last like for a 2-hour long feature film, right? You don't need to animate a character in every possible situation an animator can ever put that character in, right? So think of in terms of, let's say you have one shot that has a character's hand shaking his fist, and that's the only time that character ever shows up, right? And all you see is like from, maybe just shoulder down, that character shaking their fist. Like, why would you model an entire open hand, rig an entire hand, worry about all that skinning, try to rig the character putting their hand in that fist, worry about the entire body, and then just have that fist shake? Just like model a hand closed and put the joints in there and shake it. You already know what you need to create for your film. That's why we did the animatic. So limit the amount of rigging you have to do to achieve the exact result you want, right? So some of you, though, do have full characters that you need to rig. How many of you have a humanoid character that you need to rig, right? Ish. So we're going to talk about some of that. Because the way I do that, like, I haven't manually rigged a full character probably in like 7 years, right? I don't like that part of it. I like the animation part of it. The animation part of it is the part that people come to me to do, or for, right? And so why should I spend half of that time rigging when I could be doing it animating? So some of you have probably heard me go on about this before. There are several auto rigging solutions that I'm a big fan of. The first one, like, I swear, they need to pay me royalties for as often as I mention the setup machine. I know not everybody is huge fans of this, but I have a licensed version of the Setup Machine 3. If you want to use it, or if you think this is something you would use in the future, it's $100 for the license of it, but I can rig characters or help you rig characters with my version if this is something you're interested in using. It's a similar rig to the characters you animated for the game set in character animation, if anybody was in character animation. It do work. And it's a similar rig to the BinBot rig if you use that in Animation Fundamentals. I say similar because that was the setup machine for games. This is the setup machine 3, which also works for games, but is a little bit more optimized. It just works a little bit better. So there are issues with it, but it's one of the better ones that I found. And it's also one of the quickest ones I use to set up a character. It also has a lot of modular pieces, like if you needed to create a tail on a character, we can add that in. Having said that, that's not the only solution for auto rigging. So I'm going to look this one up because I keep forgetting about it. Art rigging toolkit. Yeah. So Unreal has an auto rigging solution called the Art Rigging Toolkit. I think you have to download it, if I'm not mistaken, through Unreal to install it into your software, but it will generate a rig as well. Like you create this proxy character, and this rig is sort of optimized to go straight into Unreal. I've heard both good and bad things about this. Like some people like it, some people hate it, but it is an auto rigging tool and it is free. But I think the way you have to download it is through Unreal's, if I'm not mistaken, it's through Unreal's marketplace, and then you put that into Maya as a plugin to set up your character. So most auto rigging tools are going to work. So this is it's Animation Rigging Toolkit. So most auto rigging software is going to work similarly. You create a bunch of proxy objects, you put those in the correct location, it will create a rigged skeleton for you, and then you usually have to do the skinning yourself. It'll try to do the skinning, but it never gets it right, and you have to kind of go through and do a little bit of skinning either way. So some of the ones that you can find, how many of you are familiar with high-end 3D? Anybody ever go there? So this is a location you can go for a lot of scripts and plugins for Maya, and other softwares as well. It used to be sort of the go-to place for housing free rigs and stuff as well, but a lot of people have put those in other places, Gumroad, CG Trader and stuff. Excuse me. So I'll show you how to use this. First, we go to our search engine, choose the software, which is going to be Maya, choose the category, and we can do scripts and plugins. And then I usually just type in rig or auto rig or rigging, something like that. And so if I type in rig, you're going to start seeing a whole bunch of them pop up. Some of them are going to be actual character rigs. Some of them are going to be software packages that will allow you to auto rig. So I'd slap on auto rigging for the body and face of Maya. $32. I've never used it. I'm pretty sure I've used rigs that are similar. The Rapid Rig Modular is one that's relatively popular. But the thing you'll notice is all of these are showing up as something with a price, right? Stuff like this HZBS for Maya, and there's one that's called the Rigging Toolkit. Those are not rigs as much as they're tools to allow you to rig, the rigging toolbox, I'm sorry. Those are more like tools that allow you to create rigs faster. So you know those scripts I was telling you that most rigging artists have, it's basically like somebody sold their version of those, right? Now I can hear it in your head, like, you're like, but I only have $5. Right, or like whatever. Like you don't want to have to spend money on this if you don't have to. And so I'm not saying go out there and spend money to get this project done. There are free alternatives. Usually they're free for a reason, or they're free for like student use. So when I search here, it's going to bring up all the pay versions. But if I go back to that search, it's because I was searching the wrong section. I was searching the store, and instead I'm going to search free files. Sort of set it up the same, scripts and plugins, rig, search. And you're going to find that there are several, that might work. There it goes. there are several auto rigging solutions in here for Maya. So that rigger, I think the full version is like $300, but there's a trial for free. I don't know what the licensing is for it. There's a free version of the slap-on rig. And there's actually a whole bunch of them. You'll see like there's five plus pages for this. Some of it's going to be auto rigging software. Some of it is going to be like tools for rigging, right? But the one I want to draw your attention to is Advanced Skeleton 5 for Maya. This one is free for non-commercial use. Okay. Now, I have tried to nudge you all in the direction of making this something you could use for commercial use if you need to. But this is a good option, right? So similar to a lot of things, right? If later you get the opportunity to make money on this, you can always purchase the full version. Advanced Skeleton is like one of the more popular auto rigging softwares. In fact, has anybody ever used any of the 3dAnim rigs? Yeah. So if you look up like, oh crap, that's not what I wanted to do. If you look up CG, if you haven't used them, come to Portfolio tomorrow night. You'll see like 20 of them, right? It's all of these rigs, right? And so pretty much most of the, like this is the rig that we use for the Portfolio art test. Several of this one as well. Several of these you'll have seen before just in other people's demo reels. And although I'm not 100% sure on this about across the board on it, I know a good percentage of these rigs were created with Advanced Skeleton. So the final rig that you get out of this is the advanced, or are the ones that 3dAnim guy is selling. So, and I think it's a pretty good rig. I see if he has any pictures of the actual rig on it. So yeah, so it's a pretty good auto rigging software. The only downside to Advanced Skeleton is if you decide you want to use it for commercial use, the cost is more expensive than like the setup machine. I want to say it's like in that $600 or $700 range for an individual. Let's say you make this amazing short film and suddenly you want to start submitting it to film festivals or somebody offers you some money for it. That's the point where you could go buy the full version so your conscience is clear to submit it to a short film festival or to a film festival. But for this project, if you wanted to use it, you could use this version of it. You have to create an account in High-End 3D to download it, but it's free for non-commercial use, for independent use. Now, there's a dozen others on here if you want to dig through them. So part of this is going to be some research on your end. What do you need to do to figure out how to rig your character, right? One of the ones I wanted to show you though is actually built into Maya. So that's a surprise to a lot of people. It's only been in there for 2 or 3 versions of Maya now. But Maya, Maya has had an auto rigging software, we'll put that in quotes, for a long time that they called Human IK. Human IK is absolute garbage. Like it is, I don't know why that's still there. Like nobody in the universe ever uses it. It's terrible. However, recently they created an auto rigging tool that will create a very simple rig, usually used for background characters. So I'm going to show you how to use that one today because there's a chance that this rig may be enough for some of the characters you're needing to do, or it may be a starting point. You may be able to use this rig and then build onto it. But I will preface this and I will put it as a prologue, or a prologue as well. No, prologue's one before, whatever. I'll put it at the end as well. This is not a fully functional auto rigging tool. This is for a quick rig. So this is definitely good if you have like some stuff happening in the background, you need to throw a rig in a character. kind of quickly. I would probably encourage you to use one of the more full-featured auto-rigging tools if you are doing this for your hero character, or be prepared to add additional rigging to this. So where you're going to find this is we have these little buttons across the top up here. Right? We have the channel box, the tools menu, the attribute editor. It's the one that looks like a little person. There. Tiny Iron Man with that little thing on his chest, right? So when we click this, this is the sort of the human IK menu, or the character controls is what they call it. So this is where we would make the human IK thing if we wanted to do that. We're not wanting to go, sorry. We're not wanting to do human IK. We're going to do the quick rig tool. Now, if you come in here and this isn't visible like this, you can also find it under rigging. I think it's under skeleton quick rig right there. So if we click that, it opens up this quick rig menu. Now, there's two options. There's this one click or step by step. How many things have you ever used that worked with one click? Let's see what happens. So this is my little character. This is actually one of the first times I ever taught 3D animation. This is one of the characters I gave the class, and they did a little short with this. So I'm just going to select all the mesh and hit auto rig, and it does everything. It tries to guess where the joint should be. It creates a rig for that, and it skins it. So if I just hit the auto rig button, it's just going to do everything for me. Bless you. And give it a second. There's actually a little slider. Yay, it worked! So notice where his shoulders are. Notice where his hips are, right? Let's see if this worked. So some of the weird things about this is it doesn't have FK and IK, or FK or IK. It has a weird hybrid of the two, right? So I can either grab this control and move it around. It's perfect. Or I can rotate here. So I get like an FK or an IK version. I think it's working pretty well. So let's go ahead and go back. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. So what it does is it creates a quick rig character here. If I delete that, it just deletes everything out of there. And then I have to add a new quick rig character like that. And we're going to go through the step-by-step process. So if I select the full character, I first have to add all of the geometry to that. So add that. So those are the 4 pieces I'm using. The next step is to create the guides. So when I create that, it's going to create these little temporary joints all over the character. So you see them here? And if you go to your channel box, when you highlight one, you can see what that is. So this is my left hand, right? And then this is my left forearm, right? And so I'm going to start putting these where they belong. So that's close enough on the forearm. If you look up here, that's the left upper arm, that's where the shoulder is, and that's the clavicle, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and move those, and I can also kind of hear what you're thinking. Wait, Greg, it's not moving the other side. You're just affecting one side. I know. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of put these where I want them on this one side. So maybe something like this. Get them in here for the knee, for the toe. And once I get it all where I want it on the front, on the left side, I can select these left joints, and this button right here will mirror the location of that over to the right joints. Okay? So now they're all lined up. This is the character's hips. I think that needs to be lower. And then these, I think these 3 are the spine joints. Those also need to be lower. So I'm going to take that way down. And I want to tumble around here and make sure everything is kind of in the places I want them. To me, that feels like that needs to go back a little bit more. That needs to go back a little bit more. To mirror that across too. There we go. And do what?
Shoulders look like
Oh, they're a little too far forward. Oh yeah, good point. Good catch. There we go, like that. There we go. Mirror that across. This is the neck joint right here. So really the neck and the head kind of work together. So that's the neck, this is the head. And I'm putting this at the location at which I want them to deform, right? Or want them to rotate. So once I have all of that, I can click this create update below on section number 4 here, skeleton and rig generation. And this is going to create a skeleton and a rig for us to manipulate. So create update. There we go. So that's proportioned a little bit better. And you can see kind of how this works and get a reasonable expectation out of it. But again, this is a very limited rig. Now, one of the cool things about this, though, it is like pretty much motion capture ready. So if what you're doing is cleaning up some motion capture, you can always bring that into this character on motion, bring the motion capture data onto this character and drive it around and then animate on a layer on top of that to fix it. So we have this, we got to skin it now. So if you just create updated skinning, this right here, it's going to do its best, but you still get some pretty bad results. Right? Like I don't even know what it's thinking there. And it's using geodesic voxel, I think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this bind method here, and I'm just going to choose these options, like this little cog. It'll get rid of the skin and bring up my skinning options here. As with every time I've ever tried to skin, I choose the most desired version first, realize it doesn't work, and I have to just work my way down. So heat map, when heat map works, it works best. But heat map only works like 10% of the time. Your mesh has to be watertight, and all of your joints have to be inside of that watertight mesh. So really, it can be awesome when it works, but it usually doesn't because most of our models aren't like that. Geodesic voxel does okay. I'm kind of surprised it didn't do better. Let's try it again to make sure. Yep, that's terrible. I don't know why it's doing such a bad job there. So we'll go back here, go back to our settings again. So usually my go-to is closest in hierarchy. And so that means if this hip is closer than this hand, let me rephrase that. If I'm trying to skin this hand mesh, but this hip is closer to the hand than like the elbow is, it will still choose the elbow because it's closer in hierarchy, right? It's not going to be perfect, but it will help a little bit. I could probably reduce my drop-off rate, and that may help a little bit as well. Weight distribution. Let's try neighbors. I haven't tried that. Bind skin. So with all skinning, I just always have to try a few things to see how it works. So that worked pretty well. The only thing I'm really getting is I'm getting some pulling here, and I'm getting some deformation in the head there. But that's a reasonable amount of skinning to clean up, right? Like that's not something that's overwhelming. Let's see how the foot worked. That could be way worse, right? Now with all of these, again, I can adjust these controls. Like I can go through and select all of my controls. They're really tiny right now, but it's set to X-ray, so actually there's another really, really tiny one if you look really closely. Look at that guy. So I go through here, select all of them. There's this option right here for radius on each of these joints. And I can scale those up a little bit and get something a little more usable, right? And these little points right here are our aims for the knee, I think. Maybe not. So let's see. So that's pretty reasonable in terms of getting a quick rig on here. I would still want to do some skinning to make this work, right? But again, there's no fingers on this, there's no toes on this, there's no tail. Anything that your character needs that is in that neighborhood of stuff, you would have to add on to this rig afterwards, manually. So again, I think I would spend a little bit of time learning advanced skeleton if you have to pick one, or one of the other free auto rigging softwares. But I'm also more than happy to help you rig it with my version of the setup machine if that's something you're interested in. Okay, and I guess truthfully, we still have a license, academic license for the setup machine for games. I know the bugs that exist in that, so we could always rig that in the lab if that's something you want to use as well. Okay, in terms of character rigs though, there are none of the auto rigs that will give you an option to rig a character's face, at least not well. I think the slap-on rig said it does, but I've never seen one. The people who make the setup machine used to make one called the face machine, and it was the closest I'd ever seen to one that worked, but it worked in these really crazy ways. You basically had to create this second version of the character's head, and then it did a wrap deformer on the character's head. So it wasn't game friendly or anything like that. The deformations are pretty good though. So I wanted to spend a few minutes talking to you about blend shapes. How many of you have used blend shapes before? Okay, cool. Let's talk about what they are. I'm just going to go ahead and go to new scene. Don't save. Get rid of all of this. No. Yeah, this will work. So I have a sphere, right? Let's say there's a deformation I need on this that is a very specific deformation, right? Like if I wanted to squash and stretch, that's easy. I use the squash and stretch deformer. If I wanted a bend, I use the bend deformer. If I wanted joints, I use joints. If I want a cluster, I use a cluster. But sometimes there's just some things that a specific deformer will not get, right? So let's say I wanted this thing to grow horns, right? Or I wanted, I don't know, like I wanted this edge in the center to sort of scale inward like this, right? Like there's not like a specific deformer that does these things. Well, there is. It's called a blend shape. So the old way in which you would do this is you would make a duplicate of the model that's the exact duplicate. You can't extrude new faces or anything like that. The topology has to be the same, right? And then you would make changes to that duplicate and add that to the original model as a blend shape. And then you could blend in and out of that. But I'm going to show you how this works now. They've made it a lot easier to create these on the fly. So if we go to Windows, Animation Editors, and it's this shape editor, we get this empty menu. So the first thing is you have to create the blend shape node, right? So with the object selected, I'm just going to say create blend shape, and it's going to create the blend shape node. This is like the deformer, right? This is the thing that makes it deform. But we need a target to deform to. So I'm going to go ahead and add a target as well. And what this really did is it kind of made a hidden version of our mesh, right? And so if I go in here and grab all of these vertices, while it's in edit mode, you got to make sure that that's always on, right? And I scaled this flat, right? Let me get back down a little bit, right? The thing you'll notice is like, I just made a lot of changes to that, but again, edit mode has to be on. And now if I turn this blend shape up and down, it'll blend in and out of that original shape, right? Actually, let me undo all that and do that without the, let's do it like that, and then move that down. And then, so we have now the same object, right? It's just the top of it goes flat, right? And it goes perfectly flat too. So I've just arranged all of those vertices to be flat. Now I can turn off edit, go ahead and turn off that blend shape, and I can rename this. I call this flat top. Okay. And so now when I turn that on and off, I realize that's what I'm doing. I'm making this flat. And I can keyframe it. If I wanted this to happen over time, I click here to keyframe it, go to frame 20, turn it on, click there. And so now I have this animation of it going flat. So I'm going to undo those 2 keyframes though, because we're going to keep making more stuff. I want to make another blend shape. So I add another target, go in here to the bottom, grab these vertices, make these completely flat, right? That up. And we can call this one flat bottom, right? I can make another one, and we could do that thing I was talking about with the edges. All right, I could go in here and scale that in. All right. So now we get this, right? And we'll call this center in. And I can make the one I was talking about earlier too. I can go in here and grab a couple of vertices, right, and just make a set of horns out of it, right? Like pull these up. Why is it not working? Oh, crap. I gotta make a new blend shape for that. Add target, make some horns. Well, that's too soft. Just do that whatever I want to with them. Bless. Like all of this is bless you. All of this is specific vertex-based deformations, right? I'm basically taking a range of vertices and I'm taking all the vertices in my model and I'm telling Maya, I want you to memorize this change between where they were and where they are now, right? And I'm saving that as a morph of this, right? So the cool thing about blend shapes is that they're additive, right? It's not that I have to say flat top on, then flat top off before I can turn on flat bottom, right? I can turn flat top on all the way, and then I can add flat bottom to it, and I can add center in to it. I can even add these horns to it, right? And they're going to add on top of each other. Think of it this way. All of those vertices have like this home location. Like this is where they started, right? Each of these blend shapes is just a value, translate X, Y, and Z, of how that changes, right? Like the horns, those vertices are higher in Y and forward in X a little bit, right? And so Maya just memorizes that. And if I didn't change them anywhere else, then it's not going to change anywhere else. But if I change them again in a different blend shape, it's just going to add to that number, right? It's additive. It's going to continue to, push that even more. Let's say my horns, let's say I actually really wanted them to go higher than that, right? Right now my blend shape goes between 0 and 1, right? But let's say let's say after I'm done animating it, I'm like, I wish I'd have pushed it a little further, right? I can set that to 1.5, and it will, wait, let me try that again. Number lock, 1.5, and it'll make them even bigger. In fact, I can set this to -1, and it'll take them inside instead, right? So I can use this to go both in the positive and the negative of that blend shape. The only problem about going in the negative or going past 1 is you're not in control. Maya's sort of taking not a guess, but it's just continuing to scale that curve up. So, so it can be a little unpredictable, but sometimes you can use that anyway. So, this was primarily used in and I guess still is, in facial animation for characters. So I'm going to bring up my Pinyin, because my Pinyin is adorable. I like him. Save little Pinyin. And so this guy's rig would actually be pretty simple, right? I probably could even use that that quick rig tool for him. I tested it out a little bit beforehand, and it's not bad. Like, he doesn't have that many controls. If I were animating him, I would want to add a lot more jiggle controls and stuff, so I'd probably keep those, like retain the ability to do that. But for the most part, all I really need is a skeleton in the right view here. So I'm going to go ahead and go to skeleton, create joints. So I need like a skeleton for his spine, right? And then I would also end up doing a skeleton for his jaw. So I'll go back in here, start with this guy, add a couple more joints in here, right? Just so I can get that jaw to rotate. So I'll go ahead and go to display, animation, joint size. I'm going to make these a little smaller just so you can see them more appropriately, right? There we go, that works. And that's probably not exactly the right location. Like that, and that. Kind of doing the sloppy version of this, right? But the point of this is so I can skin this character to do what I want it to do. So let me go through here again. I don't want that one. Yeah, I don't want that one. So I'm going to grab these and go ahead and skin, bind skin. And I selected very specific joints, so I can, instead of selecting it to the joint hierarchy, I'll just do selected joints and hit bind skin. And so now all of that's going to deform the way I want it to. I mean, I know it's not perfect. And then I want to select these last two here and use those to skin the bottom jaw and this tongue. Okay? Skin, bind skin. And so now when I animate him, I get this ability to open his jaw like this, right? But that's not quite enough information, right? Like, I may want to make this thing smile, right? Or I may want to make it completely like deformed differently, right? So one of the things I can do for that, like let's say I wanted to make a blend shape for this eye to squint, right? I can go in here to my shape editor again, animation editor, shape editor, create a blend shape, add a target, and then I can go in here on the vertex level and sort of make this object squint just a little bit more. And so now I have this blend shape where he squints, right? So I can do all sorts of different rigging like that. Now generally, this works really well with the brows and works pretty well with the mouth, right? So I'm going to select this mesh. I'm going to create a blend shape because it's a different object, right? And I'm going to add a target. And for the brows, I would maybe go in here, grab some edges, make sure my Soft select is turned on. I'll probably make a pretty big selection. Just start pushing my eyebrow up. Now for me, I always go a little bigger than I think I need to, just to make sure I get what I need out of that deformation, right? It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Right? Pull it out a little bit, pull that out a little bit. Right. So this is my eyebrow up, and so you can see that now I can make him sort of raise his eyebrow up. And of course I would want to go, you want to name this, we'll call this L brow up. And then I can make a new target and do the same thing with the right brow to try to match it, right? And so now I have the ability to animate both eyebrows varying amounts, right? And so I can get a little bit more deformation on them. And then that deformation is going to happen on top of, oh, that sucks. Any rigging deformation is going to happen. Let's just ignore that for right now. Pretend that didn't happen. That's just more skinning work I need to do. Actually, it probably means I needed to put an additional skeletal joint in here for the face. So, I can also continue to add like face animation on here, but if there's multiple objects, they all have to kind of blend together. So let's say I wanted to do a smile. This is our brow up. All right. So if I wanted to do a smile, I'll make this the smile blend shape. Right. I can grab this vertex here, make sure symmetry X is turned on, and just kind of pull up the corner of my character's face for a smile. Get these cheeks up there a little bit as well. Right. And so that's mainly working on the cheek part here. Right. I'll also need to add one to the other meshes though, right? Like if I go here to this mesh, it needs a blend shape too, right? And so for that, I would have to grab these vertices and pull it up, maybe rotate it. The center point, make it a little smaller. And so now hopefully between those two changing, we're going to get sort of that smile effect. I'm going to go ahead and add one on the bottom as well. No, that's not what I need to do. Create blend shape. There we go. And I'm doing this very quickly just for speed's sake. Too far. Huh? It's a cartoon, Ryan. So I'm going to go ahead and turn all of those down because I know what some of you are probably curious about is like, do I have to animate it in this ugly thing over here? And the answer is no, but that means you have to do a little bit more setup. You can animate it in this ugly thing. But for something like this, like I really want one controller driving all of that, right? So there's a couple of different ways we could do that. I could just create physical objects in the scene, and those physical objects will drive these values, right? So scale this down. I'm going to freeze my transformations, right? And really, this is just a 0 to 1 change, right? And so that means that actually, I'll do a duplicate of this one too. I'm going to show you on the actual character. And you all have probably seen this before on physical rigs, right? We have something like this. Modify, freeze transformations. So still 0 to 1 isn't that far, right? What I can do is I can use the connection editor to drive these values, right? So I can go to Windows, General Editors, Connection Editor, and I can use my Translate Y to drive one of those blend shapes. So the way I do that, I can select the blend shape over here. So let's grab blend shape 2, reload right, and you'll see under here I should have, where are you at? I may have to do it this way. I'm going to have to go over here on the character, select blend shape 2 here, and hit reload right. Yeah, that seems to work better. Because what I'm looking for is weight, right? And so right now what I want to do is I want to have this object's translate Y drive my smile, okay? So if I go translate Y, and I'm going to hook that to the weight of the smile, you'll see that when I move that, now that's how I can animate him. Make him smile real big, right? I can also go through here and sort of one at a time add these other objects to that same control. Right? Translate Y, weight, it was that. And of course, this thing here, blend shape, reload right, weight. And so now what I have is this control that the translate Y allows my character to smile a little bit, right? Now what you see with blend shapes driving a lot of faces on online is this, like it's right here on my character's face, and I want that to drive my eyebrow. So I'm going to reload left, again it's still my translate Y, and I want my translate Y to drive my the weight of my left brow up, right? So translate Y, left brow up. And now I have this control that looks like it's making my eyebrow smear, right? Okay. Is this making sense? Okay. You're each going to have different rigging solutions, rigging concerns, rigging things, right? And so my job is to kind of help you work through those. Think of this as a problem-solving challenge, though, right? I know a few people in here are doing the car chase scene. If you have two cars that kind of crash into each other, this is how you could make that dent happen. Right? You can just animate that dent come on, right? Somebody asked in the previous class, like, what if you need extra mesh, right? Like, what if like that horn animation I did, it was very low poly, right? What if I wanted it to look like horns were really growing out of the character's head? And one of the ways you can do that is to kind of conceal that extra topology, like you flatten it out, right? If I wanted my character to grow a unicorn, right? Then what would happen is I would just have all the edge loops for that unicorn built into the brow, and then that blend shape would grow them out. It gets more complicated because there's a lot of stuff you have going on in other deformations in that area, so you have to be careful with your skinning and stuff like that, but that's usually one of the ways you can make that happen, yes.
So would the easiest way to, like, just for example, the unicorn horn, would it be easiest to model it with the unicorn horn and flatten it to the forehead?
Actually, to do, maybe. Model it to the unicorn shape and then flatten it to the forehead. I'll be honest, that's kind of an exaggeration. Like really if you wanted to, because the horn would probably end up being a different material, but if you needed like a knot to grow out of that same material, yeah, that's probably what I would do. You see that happen with a lot of times characters in games share the same topology, but if you have like male and female characters, they don't all need the same topology, like breasts, like beards. And so you'll see like a female character and you'll see the topology, and she has a really dense like edge looping in the chin, and that's so you can make a beard grow out of that, right? And so is anybody using Make Human? Yeah, so you'll notice that in Make Human that character has topology for male and female anatomy, and sometimes it's like it just feels like areas are too dense, and that's because those areas need to work. That's more of a pipeline issue. Like Unreal did a lot of stuff with Gears of War, where every character in that whole game shared the same topology, and so that meant that topology had to have the right edge looping to be able to deform into any possible character. I'm kind of off on a different tangent now, though. But you get the idea, right? If a horn were going to grow out of this penguin's forehead or my forehead, it would only grow so far before it would break the skin, and then that's a different type of effect that we would have to get, right? Like we would have to kind of fake that happening, maybe with a seam or something like that. So. Okay. Again, I know I'm covering a lot of stuff, and I'm kind of covering it in an overview sort of way. Hopefully what you're doing is you're listening to this, watching this, and thinking of ways you can adapt your own character to it, or your own whatever to it. There are lots of things that need rigging. It's not always just characters. Right? All right. Any questions? Comments? Yes. Okay, cool. We'll get to the terrain stuff here. So I do have another thing I wanted to ask, which is I'm curious of things that you need me to do lectures about. I have that blocked out for 3 animation lectures. I think that there's lots of wiggle room in there for me to squeeze some stuff in. I know something some people are curious about is how to make, we already saw how to do animated textures, but how to control that in a rig. And I'll probably be showing that. There's a couple of ways you can do that, but I'll probably be showing that next class period, one of the next few class periods when we're animating. So that also brings up that phrase I just said, next class period. I will probably be in the building Friday, maybe. If I don't see you, I understand. Like, it's fall break. And so I completely understand that. There is even a chance that if my wife can get out of work early, we may head out of town a little early. I think we're leaving town, but maybe not. I don't know. Really depends on how I feel by tomorrow night. I'm like, do I want to go on a trip or do I not want to go on a trip? But having said that, you can contact me if you have any questions. I just probably will not reply super fast. So this is that window where it's going to be best to ask me questions now, because I'm guessing some of you are not going to be here Friday. I will, but more than likely, I will be around on Friday to answer any questions if you're going to be here working anyway. Anything? Yes. Stuff on it? Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video. I'll upload this, and hopefully this is giving you something. But yeah, I guess that was my other part of it, is if there's something else you would like to see a lecture on. I think we're getting to that point to where I can start doing kind of a la carte lectures that address specific topics that more than one person may be having. And so if that's one of the things you're wanting or needing, think about that. I know that the 2D face or the 2D animated texture is one of the ones that I'd like to cover and sort of show you a couple of ways to do that. So I'll probably implement that into one of the animation days. So. All right, cool. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video. I'll upload it. The rest of the class is yours, and I'll be around to answer any questions you have. Please come out to the portfolio reviews tomorrow night. They're going to be exciting. Okay.